So we will start with any of you who would like to share any announcements. We decided last time we liked that. We want to hear about what everybody's up to, and if you have any events you want to advertise or share about. Anybody have that? No?
I know I would. I just can't see the raise my hand thing. Yeah, I'm doing another one of my monthly workshops on the 28th, the 28th, the last Sunday of the month. It's a past life regression workshop, and we're going to be going to explore a previous life that you experience, where you experienced deep faith, be it a religion or something else. But we'll see what we find. And I do them every month, and I'm going to be doing a very special one in June, the end of June. This was by request. We're doing a past life regression workshop on relationship patterns and how to open to love. And that will be the last Sunday. No. Anyway, I want to say it's the last Sunday, but that's not right. That's going to be in June. So you can check it out on the on my website or contact me.
Okay. And
Yeah, it's the 30th. Okay, that's me.
And HCH is having a consciousness facilitator workshop that is co-sponsored by Peter Smith, who wrote the book Quantum Consciousness. One of his students is doing it through HCH. It's this Saturday and next Saturday, pretty much all day. So you can go to my website if you're interested in looking into that. And for announcements for us, next month's gathering on May 23rd is going to be a panel of 4 of the authors of our new book, talking about their contributions and their experience doing regression therapy. That'll be Eric Christopher, Yasmin Udwadi, Deanna Torres, and Anne Barham. So they will be sharing their authorship experience and their clinical experience with us. And see, I told you about the book. I think that's about it. Oh, I know all of you, so I don't need to ask you. We were looking to see if any new people were here from social media, but you're all regulars, so we don't have any new ones. So if you will keep your mics on mute while we do the presentation, I'm going to introduce you to our presenter, who is Val Deveraux. And Valerie is on the board of directors. She's one of our newest board certified regression therapists, even though she's been doing regression therapy for decades. She finally got it together to get board certified, and we're very happy about that. And Valerie is now living in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. She retired from her home in the US and has moved there. You can see the gorgeous ceiling in her beautiful new place. And part of what she does besides regression therapy is sacred art. And if you look at the figurines behind her, those are some of her pieces that she's done. She also does a lot of painting. And she wrote a chapter in our new book on death and past life regression. She's going to talk about that today. And after through sharing her information, she's asked me to share a few case studies, which I will do. And then we'll open it up for comments and questions and sharing from your own clinical experience. So Valerie, take it. All yours.
Great. Yes, I see those hands up. Okay. I really want to make this interactive also, so feel free to raise your hand or jump in if you have anything you'd like to add. Death and dying, most people have a fear of death or a fear of dying or both. And I think that a lot of us as regression therapists kind of forget about that. Maybe not completely, but my guess is that most all of you don't have a fear of death any longer. And so I just want to put a reminder out there that this is a big fear for a lot of people. Research studies say that over 48% of the population have a fear of death. And I think that the numbers might even actually be higher than that, because there's a lot of fears around dying and grief that aren't always calculated into those research numbers. And it's normal for people to have a fear of death. It's a normal reaction, a normal fear of the unknown. A lot of us have a fear of the unknown. However, these fears can be very limiting and holding us back from for really our full potential. And so a lot of these fears create blockages, as you all know. And I found that a lot of people that have lived with these fears, and maybe they've even lived with these fears through many lives, for hundreds of years. And so these blockages are something that have built up for a long time that are really holding people back. So the fear of death and dying is something that a lot of clients can't articulate. Some might come in and be able to articulate what their fear is, what's going on with them. A lot of times they'll say that they have anxiety. I had a client who had severe anxiety, depression. She had a lot of sadness. She would not go to funerals. She limited a lot of the things that she would do because she had this fear of death, even though she couldn't articulate that's what it was. And I think that a lot of people present with those type of symptoms or emotions, and it's something for us to think about, that it could be associated with whether it's a fear of death in this life or something that happened in a past life that was triggered, that is bleeding over into this life. And some of those fears that people have are fear of the unknown, fear of oblivion, consciousness being extinguished, which Holly's going to talk about in just a few minutes. There's a fear of leaving loved ones behind. And this is very much, big percentages of women have this fear of leaving loved ones behind. They're also afraid of not seeing loved ones again. So that's a little bit different. The two fears are a little bit different, even though they're associated. One may be people that even believe in reincarnation or believe they'll live again may still have a fear of not seeing loved ones again. Where leaving loved ones behind could be where you have young children and they may not be able to care for themselves, or you fear for them, or you fear for, it's a little bit different fears. There's also, people are afraid of the dying process. A lot of it is unknown. They process pain, disability. It could be even asking for help. And then there's also the fear of not leaving a legacy. People have a fear that they may not leave a legacy, or they have a fear that they'll be forgotten, or maybe their life didn't have a purpose, or they feel like they didn't have a purpose. They have that fear. There's also the extreme fear of death, which is called thanatophobia. And that's that extreme death anxiety. I was talking about a client of mine who had that, and it affects many aspects of people's lives. And of course, there are psychologists and people that you can work with for those type of fears. But in my experience, past life regression is one of the most profound ways to move through those fears, to erase those fears, to help people work through that. And one of the things that I also discovered was that during the pandemic, researchers found that death anxiety, of course, greatly increased, but they found that it greatly increased among nurses, social workers, medical professionals, and it really greatly affected their mental well-being. So I think we may even be seeing a lot of people in the helping professions, nursing, medical professions, that have this anxiety, maybe even lingering aspects of this anxiety that hasn't been really delved into. And again, some of the symptoms are panic attacks, heart palpitations, depression, guilt, worry, sadness, this increased anxiety. And for some people, it could even be dizziness. There are many different symptoms that come into it. And it's something to think about and consider when you're working with clients who have, that say they have anxiety, that say they have different, maybe even it's just a deep, deep sadness. I had a client who had a lot of sadness, and a lot of it came from death anxiety. So I'd like to introduce Holly real quick to talk about the consciousness aspect, the studies. And I just want to say, many of you know Holly. She's the president of the board of IBRT, International Board for Regression Therapy. She's also a published author, a Reiki master, and a hypnotherapist, a board certified regression therapist. And she's been working in education and regression therapy for over 40 years. That's incredible, Holly. So here's Holly.
40 lifetimes, Val.
40 lifetimes.
40 lifetimes, yeah. Thank you. Okay, so part of my hypnotherapy training, of course, includes teaching about regression therapy and some of the more transpersonal modalities that we use as regression therapists. And it's very interesting in the culture of the United States that death has been sanitized. People do not know how to deal with it. They don't talk about it. Just a personal example was my mother-in-law lost her husband, my father-in-law, and he was ill with cancer for about 6 months, and they never once talked about the fact that he was dying. They never once spoke about it. So the whole topic is rather verboten in our culture, and thank God it's changing, because this whole psychological orientation called thanatology, which is death and dying, is starting to get some press and some notoriety. And it really has to be honored with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross writing her first book that gave us the idea of the different stages of death and dying. And those different stages are going to show up as areas in people's lives that they want to do work on in our practices. So it's important that we understand those different phases and where people get stuck. And then, of course, all the work of life after life that Raymond Moody started to look at the whole near-death experience and how there's a universal experience that people have when they have a near-death experience, and they come back forever changed and aware that there is no death. And then there's Gary Schwartz, who is doing studies as we speak in the University of Arizona. He has his own laboratory, and he is working to show and prove that our consciousness survives bodily death. And his first book, called The Afterlife Experiment, is so worth reading if you haven't ever read any of Gary Schwartz's work. He's very scientific, and he's making it very user-friendly to the readers. And he does mostly working with mediums and does double-blind studies to show that people can actually be contacted after life through mediumship. And he also has other ways he's working energetically to show that people survive after death. And then there's a man named John Climo, who is a Bay Area psychologist who wrote a book called Channeling. And he's showing that people can channel the spirits of dead people through research, and also through looking at the traditions of all different cultures of spiritual kinds of processes that people use in their daily lives. And then us past life therapists know all about the research that was done by Ian Stevenson, that book, 25 Cases of Reincarnation, to try to show historically and through interviewing and through following up and actually talking to people that supposedly were relatives of children, that consciousness survives bodily death. And then there's the work that's done with the electric voice phenomena, where people are being channeled, contacted through video, through through telephones, through TV screens, through recordings that are people from the other side. And we have somebody just that I know personally who's in the group right now who just recently had an experience of this that she shared with me that was very profound. And of course, all the out-of-body experiences that people report and have been studied in parapsychology. So recently in the field of death and dying, there have been movements to educate people about the use of mediumship and hypnosis for talking with the dead so that people can come to terms with the loss of their loved ones and have direct contact through their inner world with the people who've died so that they can rectify the unfinished business and have a sense of the continuity of consciousness. And I want to let all of you know about a beautiful organization that's a nonprofit called Forever Family Foundation. Have any of you heard of this? Forever Family Foundation was started by a man and husband and wife who lost a child who had unbelievable, irreconcilable grief. And the only way they were able to move forward was after going to talk to a medium who channeled their daughter for them. And based on their experience of how that affected them and supported their healing of their grief, they decided to form a foundation that board certifies psychic mediums. And it's a very rigorous program. I've sent 2 or 3 of my students to this organization and none of them have been board certified. They didn't make the mark. So they really, really scrutinize their mediums and they work with mediums to help people who are grieving to access information and make contact with their loved ones. Well, as hypnotherapists, we don't need to have mediums because we know how to support our clients in becoming their own mediums, that they can learn to talk with the dead through a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And that's another way that not only through regression therapy, but through this maybe interlife connection, we can support our clients in moving through the grief stages by actually having direct contact with the loved ones and having a chance to say whatever they never got to say and to hear what they never got to hear and to bring the love energy in and the connection with that spirit so that they can just hold that energy in here as knowing that there's a survival of them, that they'll be together. So that's kind of an overview of what's going on in the science parapsychology world primarily that's supporting us in our culture. And I often wonder if we could undoubtedly prove that there is consciousness that survives after death, how will that change our lives? What would we have permission for that we don't give ourselves now, knowing that we are eternal? And to me, it's kind of an astounding thing to think about and contemplate. And I certainly hope we're heading more in that direction with the kind of work we're doing to support it. So
Thanks, Polly. But I think that we are proving that, though. I think all of us as practitioners, with all of our clients that we work with, we prove that day in, day out, that consciousness does exist. It's a law of physics anyway, right? It's a law of physics. It can't be destroyed. And I think that working with the afterlife is a really important aspect of what we do. I know not everyone does it, but with past life regression, working with guides, working with those in the afterlife, it becomes a real healing place for many of our clients. And I'm sure a lot of you have stories that you can share of that, because it's, I think it's one of the most important aspects of doing the regression work. The healing process is connecting with the afterlife. And one of the other things, talking about death and dying in this life and people's fears around it, there's also many people who have phobias in present life based on death in a past life. So it just seems like if we talk about, okay, 48% of people are afraid of death, which I think that number may be higher. But then if you also add in people who have past life experiences where they had a death that created either a fear or maybe even a false belief or some type of a vow that they've created so that it's limiting their life now. I think that we'll see that death is really, really a huge factor in a lot of the regression work that we do. We look at death, not only past life, but you know, many clients of mine have had phobias of phobia of dark water, and when we went into his past life, and he was sailing on a ship and went down in a hurricane. It was all dark water, and he's lived his whole life afraid to go near the ocean or near dark water because he's had this fear that he couldn't quite put his finger on. And so that was one of his past lives. And I know that we all have stories like that, but I find it just fascinating how those death experiences or traumatic experiences in a past life can create the phobias in this life. And then I've had clients who were afraid of experiencing a past life regression because they were afraid of the death process in the past life. Or they said that I don't know what it'll be like. Will it be traumatic? I'm afraid. And I'm sure all of you have experienced something like that too. And I've found that most of my clients that express that are the ones that end up having the most profound experience when they go through the regression and go through their death process. I had one client who told me that she had had a near-death experience in this life, and so she wasn't afraid of the idea of death and dying. And yet when we did her regression, it was the majority of it was about her dying process in the other life and how she was going to do that and what it was going to feel like. And once she actually left the body, she was so amazed, and she said that it's beyond words. It's beyond the love, the immensity of it is just beyond words. I don't even have words for it. It was so beautiful. After she came back through it, she said that it was so profound for her to feel that and experience, even though she had no fear of dying. She said that it was so profound to feel that. And I have to say, as a therapist, it was really profound for me too. Just hearing her experience and the love that she felt and how she expressed it was such an amazing, amazing experience. I've also had a client who didn't really talk about having a fear of death and dying. And when we went into the regression, she was buried alive in a small box. And after she left the body, we talked about it. And she said, that she felt like it really was a relief to leave the body. And she said the death actually helped her gain awareness of why she felt anxiety in enclosed spaces. She said that I didn't realize that I had so much anxiety about enclosed spaces. And after experiencing that, it just released all of that anxiety around enclosed spaces. So I thought that was really an amazing, you'd think it would be very traumatic and something that someone would say it was traumatic for her, but she said no, it was liberating for her to experience it and to feel that. So Holly, did you have a client that you wanted to talk about that
I have two that came to mind. The first one was a 4-year-old little boy. And he was referred to me by his pediatrician. The pediatrician was suspicious it was a past life. That's why he referred him to me, which I think that's great. Pediatricians would even consider that. But this little boy had a very bizarre phobia that was triggered the first time his parents took him to the beach. So they had a day planned picnic at the beach. They took their son, got out of the car, started walking towards the water, and he absolutely freaked out, had a temper tantrum, and sat on the ground and refused to go by that water. They had never taken him there before. He had no previous experiences that he was responding to. And they tried it again months later, and the same thing happened. He refused to go by the water. So how do you do a past life regression with a 4-year-old? Well, I have the fortunate thing set up in my office of sand play therapy. So by working with miniature figures in a tray of sand through play therapy, he was able to create a scene showing what he was afraid of. Now, before we did this, I did some EFT with him, so he wasn't going to be traumatized going in to do the work. So he was pretty calm when he went in there. But he pointed at the figures, which were way above him, told me what he wanted in his sand tray, and he made an image of the beach with beach chairs, umbrellas, waves. I have some plastic waves, and he put fish in the water. When you move the sand, there's blue underneath the bottom of the tray. So he showed the water, and he did this whole beach scene. And then he took a little figure of a little kid and put him on the water, and then he buried him in the sand and the water. I said, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" He said, "That's what happened." I said, "Well, what happened then?" And he pointed up to my top shelf where I have all my spiritual figures, to the Jesus figure. I said, "This one?" He said, "Yep." I said, "What happened?" He said, "He came to get me." I said, "Oh, how was that for you?" It's good. He says, "Good. He got me." "And where did you go from there?" He said, "It was home. I went home." Okay, this is a 4-year-old. I said, "Wonderful." And his mother is sitting there with her eyes popping out of her head, of course, because this was new to mom, that this kid knew about this. And then we did some discussion about, well, what happens after you go home? Well, sometimes you come back and you're back here, and this is your mom now, and you went to the beach now. And do you understand why you were scared at the beach? Yeah. Do you need to be afraid at the beach anymore? He says, "No, I don't need to be afraid at the beach anymore." So that was his first past life regression that he basically did on himself. Mom reported that he was no longer afraid of going to the beach. So it was a beautiful experience for me.
Wow.
And the second one was a man who was diagnosed HIV positive during the heyday of the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco, where I live close to. And he had lost his partner to AIDS. And he was terrified on 2 levels. He was terrified that he would be next, and he was terrified that he'd never see his partner again. So we did a past life regression, which basically ameliorated both of those concerns. He had a sense of the continuity of consciousness. He was able to connect with his loved one in the interlife. He had a series of past lives that we were able to look at that were related to their partnership and relationship this lifetime. And his grief process completely shifted after that, because he had a sense of purpose. He had a sense of understanding why me. He had a sense of trusting that there was more ahead for him and his partner, and he could come to a place of some peace and acceptance.
Yeah. No, I just, the grief process, I know a lot of us work with phobias and death and that. Have you worked quite a bit with the grief process in past life regressions? And how is that different, or what are some of the techniques you use
Well,
working with the grief process?
certainly doing past life work helps, because they see they've been together before,
Mhm.
and they can connect in the inner life now. But one of the techniques I'm more likely to work with is the talking with the dead technique, which is moving into the inner life and calling the soul of the one forward, and basically doing voice dialogue to uncover unfinished business, regrets, you know, understand why did you have to leave me, that kind of stuff. So it's a part of this, it's a part of the past life process, but you can just focus right in on the talking with the dead part as a therapeutic modality in one session if you want.
Mhm. Okay. And found that that's really helpful with
Very helpful.
the grief process. Yeah.
And it's not usually accessible if it's new grief. It has to be down the road a little bit because people are so agitated and so much wanting the experience that they tend to get in their own way a little bit more. So I usually wouldn't suggest that until they've gone through some of the, basic shock, maybe getting into the sadness mode of the grief before I would do that with them.
Right. Right. And I've found that working with people who, especially it seems like women who have children, and part of that process is in a life where they've lost a child, and then working through that grief process where they're speaking to that child, where they see that child there on spirit side, or even the child as an adult, or the child as a former sibling or a former relation in another life. I found that that helps a lot with the grief process also. Yeah. So I think that's a big aspect of it. And I found that many of my clients talk about the calmness that they feel this sense of calm. I just wanted to read you what one of my clients experienced, and she had a fear of death. And after we did a few regressions and we talked about it, she said that my experiences with past life regression changed my perspective on death. Fear is gone, and a realization of home replaced it.
Mm-hmm.
When I first experienced the regression and seeing my body, so when she died, I wasn't scared. It didn't really affect me. There was a feeling of more that lingered as I witnessed it. So perhaps that lessened the effect of seeing the death. It certainly left me with a sense of peace, and my curiosity for what happens next was always intriguing. The death experience has had a profound effect on me. I think each time I go into a past life, it is a new peek at my journey, a new confirmation of growth and next steps. No words can really describe it, but I feel good, on point, or clear. It's like my compass gets reset and I'm back on my path after experiencing a past life regression. I thought that was really beautiful and a wonderful way to experience it. And this was somebody who had a lot of fear around dying, who now says that's part of her favorite part now is witnessing her death in other lives. So go figure. I thought that was pretty amazing. So I guess just to wrap it up, and then I'm going to open it up for others. I'd like to hear what some of your experiences are. I just think that now is a time of, as we all know, like great awakening. There's so many people that are opening to the idea of past lives, opening to the idea that their soul is eternal and that their consciousness is expanding, that basically we're multidimensional. And for us to be able to work with them on removing these blocks, it's such an important process and such an important gift that that you all are doing. And I just want to remind you of the beautiful work you're doing for the world and how much it really does shift people, not only the person themselves, but it helps shift their family members and the world that we live in. So remember that you're doing a great job and it's really, really helping the world. So thank you all. And then is there anybody that would like to share maybe a story about a client they have that feared death or the dying process, and the regression really made a difference for them? Howard?
Well, yes. I, I, I guess my own experiences would be the place to start. As hypnotherapists, we have what I believe is the greatest toolbox of all to help our clients. Releasing fears, anxieties, phobias, the standard bread and butter of the hypnotherapist, but also past life regression is what I've found is the greatest way to eliminate the fear of death through at least one and preferably several past life regressions. The specific process that I kind of was guided to follow, to investigate or develop, was after first getting that trust built up between myself and my client, and letting them experience their own past experience and going through the death process. We did release a lot of the fears and anxieties and phobias, but some of my clients wanted to know more about that spiritual side of their consciousness, their existence. So I was kind of guided to take them again through a previous past life that was not traumatic. It was a happy life or a productive life or one where they learned about their spirituality. And then I asked them to come back for a second past life regression to start exploring their own spirituality, their own spiritual essence, their own, who they really are as a spiritual consciousness. So in the second past life regression session, I would ask them to go to a very specific past life. This is the very first time that they experienced a physical body on Earth. I really didn't know where this was going to head, but the results were just so astounding that I was really encouraged to keep on developing it. I had clients reporting how they felt as their first physical incarnation on Earth. And then after exploring that lifetime, who were they? Where were they? What part of the Earth were they in? What was their culture like? What did they learn? How did they eat? Some were very primitive. I would say pre-Stone Age. But after that, they wanted to know more. They were curious. Like me, I'm a very curious fella. So I asked them to, on the third regression session, I asked them to go back to experience the first time that they became aware of themselves as a free and unfettered consciousness, a spiritual, completely spiritual, unembodied. What was that? Where were they? How did they feel? Where did they go? What did they do? And why? And start really exploring that. And of course, they all finally experienced another lifetime on Earth as well. But just asking them to go back to a specific lifetime in their own spiritual memory, or I shouldn't say lifetime, in to go back into their memory banks of their spiritual consciousness and describe other experiences. And it's kind of like the interlife experiences that are taught in many therapies, such as life between lives therapy, which Peter and I have both, we were both trained by Peter Smith, as a matter of fact, in the same class. But after they experienced their first recollection or recalled their first experience as a free, unembodied consciousness, the fourth and final regression session was to take them back to their first feeling, their first knowingness when they were first created. And past life regression has taught me many things. The fundamental thing that they've taught me is you, under a true state of deep hypnosis, you can ask them to go back to their own spiritual record and review it, any part of that record. And you ask and they do it. It's just automatic. It's just a question response, just a conversation. And when they experience who they are as a spiritual being and know that they are there in the presence of Creator, as well as their spiritual guide, who is always present as their soul is created, they begin to realize through their own experience and recalls under hypnosis that they are first and foremost a spiritual consciousness who, after many experiences, has gained enough experience and wisdom that they are allowed to choose to incarnate on Earth and begin to experience physical lifetimes. So past life regression has really led me down a wild path, a beautiful path, and an enlightening path for my clients and myself as well. Long ago, I lost the fear of death, primarily through hypnosis, when I experienced my own past life regressions. And this process that I've developed was my way of giving back to additional clients of mine through both my clients and the teachings, the books that I've written on the subject. So, we are all great consciousnesses with a great toolbox to make great progress in the spreading of the spiritual knowledge, not the belief or the mental understanding, but the knowledge of who we are as individuals. So thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Ron? I bet you have some stories. No? Okay. Anybody else have a story they'd like to share about maybe it's your own, when you lost your own fear of death or dying? Okay. Well, thank you all. Anything you'd like to add, Holly?
No, I think this has been a very lovely discussion, and just a reminder to keep on keeping on with the work we're doing. There's been an awful lot of grief on the planet the last 5 or 6 years. And it's really hard to hold sometimes the light in that grief, I find, because I'm somehow pulled into with my compassionate side into the pain of it all. But there's also a strong need to keep focused on the reality of who we are and what we're doing here. That's what keeps me going. Yeah. Anybody else?
Kiki, do you want to share anything? All right.
Did you ask me,
Yeah.
Val?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been doing this for a while, and I've had a lot of clients who said what Holly mentioned. I'm not sure I could do a past life regression because I'm afraid of the dying part. I don't want to go through anything awful. And I always have to reassure them that first off, their higher mind, their subconscious mind is their guide and their guardian, and that it will not allow them to go through anything that they cannot handle. If there is something that they're not strong enough to handle, you're not going to go there. And then I mentioned, you'd be surprised at how strong you are and how much you can actually handle. And but I also tell them that if they need to remove themselves, that they have permission to do that. And this is during my pre-talk, that if they find when we're going through that phase of the journey that it's uncomfortable, they can step out and watch it like they're watching a movie. I know some techniques I've read about where they're told to put a plexiglass screen, see how old they are, a plexiglass screen in front of them so nothing about it can touch them, but they can watch. Because you got to see the end of the story. You got to see how the story winds up. That's just human nature, but you don't have to go through anything unpleasant. So if it looks like to you or to me that it's going to be unpleasant, I'm going to give you a suggestion to step outside and observe it and keep yourself safe. And I also mentioned that in my experience, about 80% of the time when we die, and we've all died hundreds and hundreds of times, every time we do, about 80%, we die through old age or illness. And we're good to go. We're ready, we're tired, or we're ill, or we're ready to go. But we also die through unpleasant experiences, unexpected, painful, violent, whatever. And if it looks like that's going to be the case, my job is to keep them safe, and their job is to keep themselves safe. So I give them permission to do what they need to do to observe, or they can leave. And I had only one client who ever stayed during the death. Usually they step outside, they leave the body in the lifetime moment, but also, in the regression moment. I've only had one client stay in the body. He was thrown off a ship and he drowned. And he was describing, I can see the water going over my head. I know I'm drowning. And then he stopped talking. And then I asked him, I said, let me know when you're ready to go on. He said, okay, I'm out of the body. And I said, did you stay through the death? And he goes, yes. And then we went on. And afterwards, I asked him, why did you do that? Why did you choose to stay? And he said, because I wanted to know what it felt like to drown. And I asked him, so what does it feel like? Horrible. So, and I have a friend who's a near-death experiencer who he drowned and came back. And he describes it as one of the most painful ways to die. So, I couldn't say that at the time, but that was a silly decision. Most of the people, even when we go through the death experience in that moment, we will leave the body and start our journey home, or observe and then start our journey home. But anyway, I always let them know you can keep yourself safe, because majority of us, I mean, you mentioned 40-something%, that's way too low. majority of us have, even if it's very deep inside, have an anxiety about what is it like. And we have no cultural support. We have no way of discerning that death is just one phase of being human. And so we don't understand it, we don't know it, and we fear it. And as many of you said, doing this work, I have no fear of death. Getting there can sometimes be not fun. You know, that's my fear is what if something awful is going on, or I get so old that I can't function anymore. That's the fear, not the actual dying. Dying then would be a relief. And I'm blathering on, so I'm going to stop, but that's what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Vicky. And I think that research didn't really talk about cultures or people with different religious backgrounds, because there are a lot of people who in Asian cultures that are born and grow up with the belief in reincarnation and belief in other lives, where it did talk a little bit about religions, how some people that are very, very religious have a fear of death because the religion has made it scary for them to think about dying or what happens after they die. So there was some research that talked about that a little bit. So you may have people from backgrounds that have different fears based on their cultural beliefs. Yuki, did you have something you wanted to share? Is your mic working?
Turn your mic on.
You'll have to click it on. We can't hear you. On the computer.
Unmute yourself. Oh.
On the screen on your computer.
It's at the bottom of the Zoom. No.
You can request her to unmute, and I think it will send her a message that might help.
It is unmuted on my screen.
Same
But,
here.
but you can hover and request the person to unmute.
I did that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did. And she's not muted on this. It's her computer. It's not Zoom.
Do you think it could be your volume? Did you check your volume? You can
Turn it on your keyboard. You can press the volume button on your keyboard. And usually that'll.
If the volume goes up? No.
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 Too bad.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Well, we tried. Anybody else would like to share?
Just want to kind of comment on the concept of people who are afraid of dying in a past life regression. And one of the things I tell them is, well, whatever happened, you survived it because you're here doing this work right now. And the idea of doing this work is to release the energy that's been held in your energy system that's causing the post-traumatic stress now. So logically, it makes sense to allow yourself to go through the fear as it comes up so that you'll be done with it. So that's kind of what I'd preface that whole fear of death. I have a client right now who, believe it or not, is a psychiatrist whose brother has been a past life regression therapist for many, many years. And she absolutely refuses to do a past life regression. I know it's family stuff in there, but her primary issue is she's phobic and anxious about everything. And I finally said to her, what you're probably really afraid of is death. And she went, oh, I don't want to talk about it. She will not touch doing this work. She's that terrified. She promised me she'd read our new book. I hope she does. She'll read your chapter, Valerie.
Wow.
She won't go there.
Well, I have a psychologist friend who learned to do, she's a past life regression therapist also. And she told me that her clients, that when they work on death and go through that death process, it's made all the difference in the world with so many of her clients and people who have had long-standing trauma, long-standing problems, that once she takes them, they can do lots of talk therapy, but once they do the regression and they go through their death, there's a profound change, a
Mhm.
profound change.
Yeah.
So it's important work, important work.
Some people are addicted to their stories and are terrified of who they are without their stories, and they're not ready to do the work this lifetime. That's part of the journey. So
Well,
to make a loving space for those people too. Yep.
eternal, so I guess they have lots of time to
Right.
figure it out, right? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Holly,
Great. Yes. Thanks
for
for coming,
sharing.
Betty. So
Thank you.
put on your calendar, the 23rd of May for our next gathering with our 4 presenters who are the authors from the book. And if you haven't got the book yet, please get it and write Amazon comments for us on our Amazon program. Okay,
Okay.
everybody, take care. Thanks now.
Thank you, Val. That was great.
Thanks,
Beautiful.
everyone.
Thank you so
See you
much.
guys later. I'll see you on Monday, Holly.
Yes, you will. Bye-bye.